Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's podcast. Today is Wednesday, July 24th, 2013, and today we are talking about Detroit, the Motor City, Motown, the city built from cars, built for cars, in a nation that loves its cars, now bankrupt, filing for bankruptcy last Thursday, as most of the world knows, the largest city in U.S. history to do so. One wonders, I suspect, how long Detroit will be able to keep that record of largest city to file for bankruptcy. Detroit has been losing more and more of its population in recent years. It's lost 26% of its population in the last 12 years alone. Thus, its tax base goes away. No population, nobody to pay taxes, but still taxes go higher and higher as costs go higher and higher and government gets bigger and bigger. 1.8 million people lived in Detroit in the 1950s, the fourth largest city in America and one of its proudest cities. Now it's down to about 700,000 and falling. The city still has about 10,000 employees and has relied on the financially strapped state of Michigan to sell bonds to pay these employees for a few years. Detroit has now begun to default on its unsecured debt. About $2.5 billion of it defaulted on anyway, to conserve cash, they say, conserve cash to pay police, fire, and other services. The budget deficit in Detroit for this year is believed to be in the neighborhood of $380 million. Well, that's a pretty nice neighborhood, isn't it? $380 million. That means it was on track this year to spend $380 million more than it takes in. How can that possibly be? Where can the money come from to do such a thing? From other bankrupt entities, I suspect. Well, 18 to $20 billion in total debt this city has. Nobody seems to know for sure exactly what it is, but one thing seems certain: this will be a free-fall bankruptcy filing, meaning one with no clear plan or agreement beforehand. There is no agreement with creditors, just a free-fall filing. Last week, Kevin Orr, the emergency manager of the city of Detroit, spoke with the White House, including direct conversations with White House confidant Valerie Jarrett, the one Hillary Clinton referred to as the brain of the White House. Despite Mr. Obama's prior 2009 statement that we could not let Detroit go bankrupt, he decided to do exactly that. The federal government, it appears, will not step in to save the pensions of thousands of public workers in Detroit. Pensions and health benefits thus will be gutted in bankruptcy court. Detroit has averaged over the last 5 years spending more than $100 million for each year beyond what it takes in revenue, approaching, as we said, $380 million this year. Of $11 billion in unsecured debt the city is carrying, $6 billion of it exists in health and other retirement benefits, plus $3 billion in retiree pensions. Pensioners likely to receive less than 10% of what they were promised. And that is the problem here, isn't it? People were promised things, promises to buy them off, promises to satisfy the public unions, promises that now cannot and will not be fulfilled. 10% of what they were promised, perhaps. 36% of the residents of Detroit live below the poverty line. 36%. Last year, the FBI listed Detroit as the highest major city in America in violent crime. What does this all mean? Well, it means the population is fleeing, and for obvious reasons. As I said, more than 26% in the last 12 years, the population is fleeing, and with it flees the tax base, the property values falling, crashing, but taxes going higher and higher. And as this happens, the people who pay taxes grow weary and tired of it, and they flee to greener pastures. This reminds me of the famous line by Jerry Ford, when New York City asked him for a bailout. Drop dead, he said. That's what Jerry Ford said to New York, and that is what Obama seems to be saying to Detroit. Promises were made to retirees, and less than 10% of those promises are real, maybe. To bondholders of the city, less than 20% of those promises are real, maybe. Those promises cannot and will not be kept. A state court judge said that she forbid this filing. She said it violates the Michigan Constitution, but federal bankruptcy law says, so what, Judge? Aren't you a judge? Don't you understand that means nothing? So she says, I am going to send this to President Obama. He will be upset, and he will surely do something. And so President Obama said to her, drop dead, Detroit. Drop dead, Detroit. Well, Detroit is history. That's what this all means. Detroit is history, scrapped like one of its automobiles in a crusher in a junkyard, a dying example of unlimited promises but very limited taxes. Also, it is a symbolic monument to the free trade, permission to avoid union demands and corporate greed. Free trade. We use free trade agreements. We make the promises to the unions, and then we give in to corporate greed, and they flee to greener pastures. Buy them off with the promises, but when the job's left, there's no one to keep the promises. This is a monument to unkept promises. That is the way I see it, folks. Wednesday, July 24th, 2013. Until next time, folks, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.